how Azure Private Endpoint work. So let me ask you a question. How do you shift the resource interface from public to private? To answer this question, let me just try to create a virtual network. And here, imagine you have platform as a service, and there you can build private endpoint. So if you want to add a private endpoint to your network configurations, private endpoint to know is a network interface that create a private connections between your virtual network and your specific Azure source, as for example, platform as a service. So in this rule, for a private endpoint, takes an unused private IP address. So, but where from take it, this IP address will take it unused private IP address from address space. A specific IP or subnet in your virtual network. So here you have a subnet, okay? So in this time, we're going to take an unused IP address, okay? Let me just give you a more example here. Suppose you have a subnet that uses the address space 10.1.0.0/24. Virtual machine on that subnet use IP address such as 10.1.0.20 or 10.1.0.155. So, private endpoint here. Private endpoint get an IP address from the same address space. Such as 10.1.0.32. So private endpoint then maps the IP address to specify Azure service. Okay, so using this private IP address, effectively bring the Azure service into your virtual network. Okay, so just one note before we close here. If your client that connected to a private endpoint, resource don't need to use private endpoint assign IP address in your connection string. Instead, if you configure the private endpoint to integrate with private DNS zone, then Azure automatically assign FQ in the DM, FQDN to the endpoint. For example, if private link resource is an Azure storage, if you have Azure storage, lobby storage, Okay, the FQDN will be something like my storage account. Account 1234 decor. Windows.net. So now I hope it's more clear to understand how the Azure Private Link Endpoint work and how you shift the resource interface from public to private.